Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And my card for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge. If you are new to my channel, I participate in the Color Throwdown Challenge technically every week. I've missed the last couple, life. And it's just for fun. Anyone can play along. I will have a link to it in my blog post, which is linked directly below the video. I get a lot of questions about color. Like, how do you choose colors? You know, how do you know what colors to put together, etc., etc.? And honestly, one of the best ways is this challenge. It's been going on for I don't even know how many years now. And like I said, it's just for fun. Anyone can play along. You can check it out. And I love it because it gets me thinking outside the box. Because, like, I have my own colors that I always like to reach for, which is usually rainbow, pink and purple, you know, those sorts of things. This week's one threw me for a second because it was gray, olive green, and white. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? But once I started going, love it. I had so much fun. So I pulled out my Distress watercolor pencils. I will link to, at the end of the video, this way. At the end screen of the video, I will link to the playlist I have of all the videos I've done so far using Distress watercolor pencils. Generally, I paint with them. You know, I pick it up with, and I do that in this, but I also this time use them like kind of direct cards, like dip them in water and got my fingers and just mucked around, and oh, I had fun. I'm gonna start slowly branching out a bit more. You guys have been seeing me I've been dabbling with mixed media, just a smidge, you know? So did all of that. Everything I use is oldie but goodie favorites of mine. As always, I will have a supply list with links to everything I used as well in the description box below the video. You just expand the description box. Everything is right there. All of my links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, you end up placing an order. I get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills and fund the channel and all the things. And yeah, let's get into making this card. So I did some of my die cutting first, and this first little bit, I used the Simon Says Stamp Whirl Leaves Wafer die, which I've used in previous videos, and love it. Love it. I've talked about this like a broken record. I love how wafer dies now have, you can have all this like detail. Like, look at it. Look at it. It's so cool. So I die cut some Canson XL watercolor paper. Any watercolor paper will pretty much work for this. And then I've got my big old jar. I've shown this in like lives and different things. This is just a big old mason jar that I keep off to the side away from my elbows. And I use it for watercoloring, splattering, everything. When it gets completely nasty, I dump it out and whatever. So it's full of dirty watercolor water. It doesn't matter. And I'm dipping Distress watercolor pencils directly into it, because these are activated by water. The one thing to remember if you're going to do something like this is the more you're doing it in a session, because these will dry. The watercolor pencils will dry, and they'll be fine, and you can go use them, sharpen them, whatever, because they'll harden and dry. But doing this, dipping them into water, over the longer you're doing it, the softer they're going to get, because they're starting to absorb that water. So just keep that in mind. For something like this, it was fine. It was fine. But I knew, like, when the very first time you dip them in water, not a whole lot happens. Like you saw, I wasn't getting a whole lot of color down. But then the further you go, the more often you're dipping them in water, touching the watercolor paper, more color starts coming off. So I just say that to just be aware for those that might not, like, you don't want to like accidentally leave them sitting in water, because they'll dissolve, literally. So I put the colors on the screen that I was using. I started with crushed olive. I added a bit of shabby shutters just to give it a little differentiation, and then also added a tiny bit of gathered twigs to the sort of stem of this. And yeah, got my fingers right in there. If you don't want to get it all over your fingers, you can use a paintbrush. That works too. I was just, like I said, having kind of fun mucking around with it. And I'm going to have to do this a little more often, because I do have some OCD. And yeah, it's that need to kind of keep things like proper and pristine, but stuff like this, like specifically these types of like watercolor pencils, have fun with them. Like there's so many ways you can use them. Muck them up, you know, peel back the labels, just have fun with them. You can get so much use out of them, and I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So I did it to a second piece because once I started, like usual, I couldn't stop. I didn't make 2 cards like I normally do, but I was still having fun with it. So I set them aside after I'd added all that and let them dry and just wiped off my work surface. And then I just pulled out one of my sticky mats, this is the Altenew sticky mat, and a bird. This is the layered Warbler die set. I've used this in a few videos as well. And I also die cut this from some Canson XL watercolor paper. And for this, I pulled the mat out because I've got, you know, teeny tiny little pieces with this one. So these kind of keep things a little more contained. And this time, rather than going direct to paper, like dipping the pencils in the water and doing that, I used them kind of how I normally use these watercolor pencils. And that's by like painting with them, like picking up the color either direct from the pencil, or if you've seen my other videos using these, I do have a palette that I made up. That's in the playlist. It's one of the first videos in that playlist, so I'm not gonna like get into that because that's not what I used today. But I just took the watercolor pencils and picked up the color with my little distress watercolor brush and painted it onto all these little pieces. And for these, I used pumice stone, hickory smoke, and black soot. And funny enough, I wasn't gonna do splatter. I know. People always ask me now. It's like, are you feeling okay? But when I was pulling the color off the black soot, it splattered a bit onto like the little body die cut of the bird. And I was like, for half a second, I was like, oops. And then I was like, nope, I'm going with this. I like it. So that, and then it got me thinking, and I was like, this is something I'm going to revisit down the road. Because I was like, oh, getting a splatter like that, like directly off the distress watercolor pencils. I was like, oh, you guys know I'm going to have fun with that. We will revisit this in a later video. So anyway, I did it to those pieces. I love how it looks. I let everything dry, and then I assembled my little bird, and it's super easy. You just follow the image on the packaging. It's, if I can do it, anybody can do it. So I just used my little craft tacky glue and put him together, and yeah, he's cute, you know. I've talked about this in past videos. I held off for the longest time using bird images in any form, because that one, even though I tell you guys, like, it's card making, it's art, it doesn't matter. We don't need to get hung up on like realism or anything like that. But I had a stumbling block with the birds, and now I want to put birds on everything, because just go for it. They're fun. So after I assembled my little birdie, I pulled out the other wafer die, and I used this just in a very recent video. This is the detail ringlet plate wafer die from Simon. Oh, one of my favorites. It's just the piercing detail on this one. So for this, I just took some of Simon's smooth white cardstock, and I just taped it into place because the cardstock was already A2 size. So I taped it in place with some Craft Perfect die tape so that it wouldn't shift, and then ran that through my die cut machine, and it just makes the most fabulous pattern. Again, it's the piercing detail. I love it so much. So I set all that aside. I'll come back to it in a minute. And I also pulled out the Thanks wafer die. This is another oldie goodie but goodie favorite that I've used on a bajillion cards. And I die cut scraps of gray cardstock with that, and then I'm stacking them together, as is tradition, to, you know, give it the dimension that I love. There is an outline that comes with this too, like an outline for the word, but I didn't use that. I just used the word to keep everything a little bit simpler, I guess. This is kind of my version of clean and simple. I've also talked about this a lot. I don't do much clean and simple card making. It's not my forte. I love it. I love what other makers come up with, because I think there's a real art to clean and simple. You have to have a lot more restraint, which you all know. I don't have that. So this is my type of clean and simple. You know, I still can sneak in a little bit of splatter. I'm going to add a little embellishments, you know, different things. So I ended up die cutting more white cardstock with that Whirl Leaves wafer die. And I kind of figured out my placement. I cut down that background to like 3 3/4 by 5 inches. And then I loved the placement I, managed to figure out with the leaves. I was like, this is perfect. So I held them both together at the same time, because I was like, I don't want to I don't want to shift anything. I want it to stay the way I had it. So got the adhesive on the back of them, stuck them to the background, put some thin foam squares behind just the head of the bird because the rest of it is layered on top of those other die cuts. So got them in place and then adhered the sentiment and stuck it under something heavy off camera, let it sit for a couple of minutes till the glue dried. And then that other piece that I had, mucked around with at the beginning, I decided to put that on the inside of the card because you guys know I like to have something on the inside of my cards. And I also grabbed just a little sentiment from the CZ Design Clean Line Stacks stamp set. I've used this in several videos recently. It's just another oldie but goodie fave of mine. And I stamped that onto the inside of my card base, which is a 5.5 inch by 4 1/4 inch top folding note card. And I stamped that with Simon's charcoal positively saturated ink. And then I adhered that little leaf cluster, let the glue dry, and then flipped the card over and trimmed off the excess that was hanging off the edges with my scissors. And then reinforced the fold there. And then decided to kind of rough up just a little bit the edges of this card front, not a ton. So I didn't pull out my little distressor tool that, when I'm really feeling the mixed media, and going all out, I'll use that. But I didn't want it super roughed up. So I just used my fingernails, even though I do not recommend, the whole nails are jewels, not tools. It's actually true because you can wreck your nails doing stuff like this. But like I say with everything, do as I say, not as I do. So I roughed up the edges a little bit, curled them up a little bit, and then I'm going to adhere this to the card base. When you do things like this, it's a little harder to eyeball, the edges, getting things straight. So it took me a second. This is also why I work with liquid adhesive because it gives me wiggle room, so I can sit there and fiddle for a bit. So got that into place, let the glue dry, and then my final little bit of embellishment. These are some Trinity Stamps Tic Tac jelly hearts. So they're just shiny little hearts. So just cute, and I went with the white ones because they still kind of keep subtle. Plus it goes with the color challenge. So I adhered those into place with some Craft Tacky glue as well. And then I paired this card with one of Simon's slate gray envelopes. And then I trimmed off the little bits there of the little stems. Got those trimmed off, paired this with a gray envelope, and that finished off this card. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I will have links to all the things in the description box below the video. I will have a link to my blog post, which you can check out. It'll have the photos, the link to the color throwdown challenge, photo or picture links to all the things, all that stuff. All of that will be directly below for anyone interested. Thank you all so very much for watching, thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I would love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.